In today's world, people feel lost in a sea of ideas. Which ones should we accept? Stay tuned because you're listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. Here is your host, Kurt Jarris.
Well, a good day to you, and thanks for joining me here for another episode of Veracity Hill, where we are striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. It's a pleasure to be here in San Diego, California. I have spent many hours already attending different talks at the annual meeting of the Evangelical Theological Society, and I also have an interest in the philosophical side of things, so the Evangelical Philosophical Society, which meets as part of that broader meeting. On today's shorter program, I'm joined right here by my friend Bob Stewart, who is the professor of philosophy and theology at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. Bob, great to have you on the program again.
It's great to be on the program.
Great to spend some time with you the past couple days.
Always good to catch up.
Let me ask you, how many years have you been coming to an event like this?
Right. So my first ETS I went to in Jackson, Mississippi in 1996.
Okay.
So I guess 23 years.
Yeah, very nice. What have been some of the highlights over the years for you?
Well, wow, highlights. There's a highlight every year. Meeting your heroes is the highlight when you're a doctoral student. Mm-hmm. But I will tell you this: you get to be a professor, you still have heroes.
Yes.
And it's so you're walking through the book displays, and you look up and you're standing next to Wolfhart Pannenberg, or Alistair McGrath, or N.T. Wright, something like that.
Yeah.
And those are surreal moments, and so I've had a lot of those. I've heard a lot of great papers. I've been at sessions that where the papers then became parts of books, that sort of thing.
Yeah, nice.
I've been at book releases. Like last year, I was present when they presented N.T. Wright with his Festschrift, which was a total surprise. He did a 20-minute lecture on theology of Paul, and then the Fortress editor-in-chief and his two former students, who are now professors who edited the Festschrift, presented it to him. He was just blown away.
You've used this term...
Festschrift.
Yes, and what does that mean?
Yes, Festschrift is German for celebratory writing. And
so this is when a number of scholars come together.
It's a number of scholars who come together and write essays in a volume with a general theme that honor another scholar for their life's work. So,
yeah. You mentioned sort of seeing the celebrities. Just yesterday I was in the exhibit hall, and I saw there was N.T. Wright and Mike Bird signing their book, and there was a line of people, and it's just scholars wanting to get their book autographed, like, a bunch of fanboys almost.
Right, yeah. So, you don't really ever grow out of it.
Good. Now, last night, you and I were both at the what I call the pop level EPS Apologetics Conference.
Right.
So it's not the academic side of things, but it's been hosted at a local church here in the city, and it invites people from any background, or if you have no previous knowledge of apologetics, to come and to hear about what reasons we have, and I hope that's within. What was the talk that you gave last night?
Last night my talk was on the exclusivity of Christ in a pluralistic world.
Okay, and if we could, I think we've chatted about that before in the program, but if we could sort of unpack those terms and what that's about. So what is the exclusivity of Christ?
Well, the exclusivity of Christ is the claim that Jesus and Jesus alone is the Savior, that He is the one that we have to come to faith in to be saved. And that is a very debatable claim these days. It's largely unaccepted by our contemporary culture, which prides itself on diversity and tolerance and so forth. And so I took up three different claims. One was that claims of Christian uniqueness are offensive because they're arrogant and intolerant. And so I talked through how we have some misconceptions about truth and knowledge and arrogance and intolerance and that sort of thing.
So it's not intolerant to say Bob Stewart is sitting in a chair at this moment. That is a truthful statement.
Right.
But the way I'm saying it is not as if I'm saying I'm better than you or... Right, so there's no arrogance there.
No, and people don't get upset about those sorts of claims.
Yeah.
Everybody says those sorts of things, but people do get upset when you say something that implies that someone else is mistaken. And so Jesus would upset a lot of people. That's a point that C.S. Lewis makes in God in the Dock, I believe, when he has an essay. He said, everybody told me that I would love Jesus. When I read the Bible, he would just be so attractive and winsome. And I found him demanding. You can't be my disciple unless you take up your cross, unless you hate your mother and father, and I am the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes unto me except comes unto God except through me. And those sorts of, he says, this wasn't the Jesus that was advertised, but it's the Jesus who can save.
There's a popular internet meme where it says, if you're ever wondering about what would Jesus do, taking a whip and overturning tables is within that realm of possibilities.
Yeah. Jesus was very subversive.
Yeah. All right, so the exclusivity of Christ in a pluralistic world. So pluralism refers to...
Pluralism means several things. Sometimes people will say they're pluralists who will say all religions are the same in some way. Maybe they have the same core beliefs, but not the same beliefs around the core. Sometimes they will say, well, all religions are legitimate responses to God or to transcendence. But what they have in common is they're all human responses. And so it ends up being more about us than it is about God. And more about our psychology and our needs than our spiritual condition. More about feeling lost rather than being objectively lost.
What would be, I'm not sure if you did this in your talk last night, but do you have a point or two about how we can go and help the religious pluralist realize that their way is mistaken?
Yeah. Well, I think one way, what I prefer to do, number one, is ask questions. That's my preferred method for all apologetics, is because questions make people the expert. Questions show that you respect what they think. You want to know what they believe. You want to know why they believe it. Questions linger with people. When you can't answer a question, it frustrates you. When you have a less than your best answer. Every one of us has had that experience of being asked a question and responding in a way that was not terrible, but afterwards you go, I wish I'd said. And so they stay with you. The only questions I remember from my PhD oral exams are the one question I had no answer for and the other question that I could have had a better answer for. So questions really work, but I try to target with my questions beliefs that people have that they don't know they have and thus they deny. Like frequently pluralists will say, well, there's no objective truth in areas of religion, or they just say there's no objective truth. And I don't argue with them in epistemological terms about how we justify our beliefs and that sort of thing. I just ask the question, have you ever been lied to? And of course everybody's been lied to, but you can't have been lied to unless there's truth, because a liar is someone who willfully misstates the truth, who says, who knows what the truth is and states otherwise. And so if you've been lied to, then there is such a thing as truth, and we all know that we've been lied to.
Yeah, very nice, good, a nice little tip there. All right, so you were slated to give your paper at the conference here today. And so this afternoon you'll be talking about the minimal facts argument, which is an argument promoted by Gary Habermas and Mike Lacone and some others about, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we can take a few things that we know from the gospel accounts, or maybe 1 Corinthians or Galatians, and we take these facts that are generally agreed by even non-evangelical scholars.
Right.
And Dr. Habermas and Dr. Lacona say, with these facts in mind, what is the best explanation?
Right, yeah.
And the best explanation of those facts is the resurrection.
Right. So this is a particularly interesting way to argue, and Gary Habermas has done more research on the resurrection than any man living today, and probably more research on the resurrection of Jesus than any man who has ever lived.
Yeah.
And the number of essays and books that he has read and cataloged is well into the thousands, and in multiple languages. And so he is the most serious student of the resurrection of Jesus, in my opinion, who's ever lived. And Michael Lacona is right behind him. And so a minimal fact consists of two things. A minimal fact must be well evidenced, preferably by multiple lines of evidence.
Okay.
And then it must be agreed upon by 90% or higher of scholars in relevant fields.
Right. So you're not just dealing with something that 60% of the scholars think, but a very high number.
Even 85% in Habermas's catalog would not qualify as a minimal fact. And so this is a very rigid test. And so at this point, Mike and Gary will affirm three minimal facts. And that is that Jesus was crucified, and that his disciples had reported experiences of the risen Jesus, and that Paul was dramatically transformed.
Mm-hmm.
They don't even include the empty tomb, that sort of thing, because not enough
scholars think that.
But it's not bare consensus. It's not just that everybody thinks it, so it must be true. It's that it has to have evidence, but then the evidence must also be agreed upon. And so either one on its own won't produce a minimal fact.
Okay.
Both are necessary conditions, but without both, you don't have a sufficient condition for a minimal fact.
Yeah. So with these three facts, I mean, and I've heard Gary give it with maybe 5 or 6 or 4 or 3.
Right. Over the years, he's differed. Mike says in his book that Habermas is now at 3.
Okay.
And those are the 3. Other times they've said the transformed life of James. Mike doesn't include that, and apparently Gary doesn't either, because the sample size on James apparently is not high enough, but they don't tell you what the number is.
But let's say there's an individual that is willing to go with, say, what 75% of scholars. When you do that, then you get maybe more of those facts in there, which can bolster your case.
Right.
But is this even a good approach to leading people to the Christian worldview, or are there concerns with it?
Yeah, it's a good approach sometimes, and I have some concerns with it as well. And so sometimes I use it. Sometimes I use something like it that comes close. Sometimes I don't use it. Twice this fall I've given public talks on 10 reasons that you should believe in the resurrection of Jesus. Well, obviously 7 of those are not minimal facts.
Yeah, by the 90% threshold standard.
Right, but I think they make for a strong cumulative case.
Okay.
So my basic approach and philosophy of apologetics is that apologetics always involves a real person with real issues, particular context, and that you need to interact with that person, ask questions of them, actually get to the heart of their concerns, and then respond. And so if you can get 10 reasons in, you should. If you can only get 3 reasons in, you should. Most non-scholars will let you get in way more than 3 reasons.
Sure.
But for some people, in some situations, like say Society of Biblical Literature, American Academy of Religion, the minimal facts method is the best way to argue.
Yeah.
And so I do have some minimal concerns
Okay.
about the minimal facts argument. One of which is that on the minimal facts argument, Habermas and Lacona are forced not to use things that they believe, things that they have good reason to believe, things that almost everybody believes, but it might be only 85% as opposed to 90%.
Right.
And sometimes those beliefs are not, they fail to raise to 90%, not because liberals and skeptics don't accept them, but because conservatives don't accept them.
Really?
Something like the dating of the Gospels.
Okay.
So I personally think that all 3 synoptic Gospels were written before AD 70 or 70 CE. And I'm joined in that regard by a number of conservatives and even some liberals. Adolf von Harnack thought that Mark's Gospel might have been written as early as in the 30s.
Huh. Wow.
James Crossley, who doesn't even believe in God, thinks that Mark's Gospel was written earlier than that. Or the famous liberal British bishop, John A.T. Robinson. So the liberals, all the skeptics, except for these odd skeptics out, no skeptic is going to argue something other than that, basically, except for the few odd ones and a number of conservatives.
Right.
So it's mainly the conservatives. I can count on one hand the liberals I know who say it's earlier than 70.
So the conservatives are holding...
So the conservatives are keeping it back from being a minimal fact. And so that's a
concern.
So why wouldn't this be a good way to argue with liberals if liberals to the 98% accept this, that sort of thing?
Yeah, interesting. Now the motivation for the minimal facts argument is to say, if we have to play by your rules of methodology, let's see where we can get.
I think that's one motivation, but I think there are other motivations as well. And one is that you want to argue from a solid foundation. A more solid foundation is better than a less solid foundation. You want more certainty rather than less certainty. So that's a positive thing about the method. I also think that it allows you to focus. One great thing about the method is that you don't waste time disputing, is this in, is it out? Okay, I accept it, you don't accept it, we'll just throw it out. And so there are lots of really good things about the method. And Mike and Gary have used it to great effect, and I use it frequently myself. But I just want people to be aware of both the good and perhaps the limitations of it.
And in our very short time engaging on the subject, I can already think of another concern with the minimal facts, and while it could be good in an elevator sort of discussion, for example, you might not talk about the corroboration of Luke when he references, say, political figures, which helps build a overall case for general reliability of Luke and the other authors. So, but of course that sort of takes more time than the elevator speech.
Well, Mike and Gary both believe that the Bible's reliable. And so that's not an issue, but the minimal facts method doesn't depend upon one accepting the Bible as an issue. That's one of its strengths, is that somebody can say, well, I don't believe the Bible, I don't think the Bible's the Word of God. I don't believe in inerrancy or inspiration. That's not the point. These are facts that are agreed upon by Christians and non-Christians, conservatives and liberals, theists and non-theists. This is historical evidences, not theological or scriptural evidences per se.
Yeah, nice. All right, let me ask you about your upcoming conference in January.
Right.
Defend 2020. Defend, by the way, is a good name for, we've got our Defenders Conference that we do, and you've got Defend.
Yeah.
So good, I like that there. So you've been doing this for a number of years now, and this year, give me some, tell me who are some of the main speakers and what they'll be speaking on.
Okay. So we're going to have Frank Turek.
Okay.
We're going to have Doug Groothuis, who's written the book in Christian Apologetics, the monster IVP book of 800 pages or so. We're going to have Timothy McGrew. We're going to have Gary Habermas.
Yep.
We're going to have James Walker and Rob Bowman.
Yep.
And we're going to have all of our faculty. We also did something unique this year that we issued a call for presenters, like ETS has a call for papers.
Right.
And so a number of people proposed presentations to us, and we had more presentations than we could accept. And
nice.
And so we're going. In fact, you were one of those people, and you were accepted.
This is true. Yes.
And so we're going to have lots of great young apologists. We're also going to have people like myself and our new president, Jamie Dew, in New Orleans Baptist Seminary has a new president. And so all of that's going to be going on. A lot of the people that are speaking at the EPS Apologetics Conference last night, tonight, and tomorrow at Maranatha Chapel here in town are going to be there.
Yeah.
And so we're going to have classes that our students can earn credit for: Christian apologetics, the problem of evil, Christian ethics, pulpit apologetics. How do you preach apologetically?
Yeah.
We're going to have a class in postmodernity and contemporary theological issues, and then the class that Gary Habermas is teaching. Gary is on faculty at New Orleans as a trustee elected visiting professor. So he'll be the professor of record for a course called Dealing with Bible Difficulties.
Oh, nice.
And he and Rob Bowman will be teaching that class.
Yeah.
So that's great stuff. And one of the things I think is most unique about our conference, by one I mean two. One is its length.
So I was going to say
5 days.
Yeah.
So it's intensive, but because it's 5 days, the speakers are eating in the cafeteria with the attendees, and there's a great fellowship and downtime and that sort of thing, and interaction. And we have things at night, book signings and Q&A with the speakers after hours, and we even have a trivia night, which was phenomenal last year.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, most conferences you can buy the talks if you like them, or if you had to choose one out of 2 sessions that you wanted to hear. Last night I think we had 5 breakout sessions going on at the same time. Well, obviously you could only go to one, even though all 5 of them were good. And then you could buy the other 4. But at Defend, you don't have to pay extra. When you register, you get the whole conference. We're going to have 10 breakout slots, 12 to 15 people speaking at a time. We're going to record it all and give it to every person who registers for the week.
Yeah.
And all of the plenaries we'll give to them in video.
Oh, great. Now, in past years, correct me if I'm wrong, you've opened up the conference to the public for evening sessions.
Yes. So the conferences, evening sessions are open to the public. So Jamie Dew will be speaking on Sunday night. Now that's a special additional thing.
Okay.
Then Doug Groothuis is on Monday night.
Okay.
Then Tim McGrew is on Tuesday night. And then Wednesday night is Frank Turek, and Thursday night is Gary Habermas.
Okay. So even for folks that may not want to come through the day part, or if they've got a job that they do or something, they can still come to those talks at night.
And we will live stream the plenaries.
Yeah.
So if you're in Chicago, I don't know who lives in Chicago, but or if you're in San Diego or Lynchburg, Virginia, or Charlotte, North Carolina, you can still see the plenaries live, and they're in our chapel, and we have a good group attend. So
good, great. Well, great to be with you, chatting with you about a couple apologetic issues and learning more about the Defend Conference. So
great.
Look forward to being with you just in a month and a half or so.
Yeah, great. I've got a lot of work to do. You're stressing me out.
Great, thanks, Bob. Well, that does it for our program today. I'm grateful for the continued support of our patrons. Those are folks that just chip in a few bucks each month, $5, $10, or $20 each month. We'd love to get your support. Please go to our website, veracityhill.com. Click on that Patron tab. I'm also thankful for the partnerships that we have with our sponsors, Defenders Media, Consult Kevin, The Sky Floor, Rethinking Hell, the Illinois Family Institute, and Fox Restoration. I want to thank our guest today, Bob Stewart, for joining me here. And I want to thank Chris, who's done some editing behind the scenes. But last and certainly not least, I want to thank you for listening in and for striving for truth on faith, politics, and society.
You've been listening to Veracity Hill, striving for truth on faith, politics, and society. This is a listener-supported program. For more resources, including past shows, visit veracityhill.com.